I recently got involved in a discussion online about Joseph Smith where somebody finally replied he was a convicted con man. Have you ever heard this? Years ago on Swedish television, my favorite atheist, Richard Dawkins, said the same thing, and that the Book of Mormon was an obvious fake. Pop star Brandon Flowers, who is also a Latter-day Saint, rather boldly challenged the accusation.
Do you believe
And for you
that
to call this man a charlatan, I do. I take offense to it.
he was a convicted charlatan? He was a convicted con man?
No, these are all falsehoods. You should do your research.
Well, I think I have.
Yeah, you have.
But look,
You've almost read the book.
Can you believe that Brandon Flowers had the audacity to tell the venerable biologist Richard Dawkins that he, of all people, hadn't done his research? Was it true? Was Joseph Smith a convicted con man? Or is this a ruse to keep you from finding something way more important? Welcome to Anxiously Engaged. So, how did Joseph Smith end up a convicted criminal con man? Well, here's the story in a nutshell. A young Joseph Smith and his father were hired by a group of men led by Josiah Stoll, who had been digging for lost treasures. Mr. Stoll was convinced there was an old Spanish silver mine in the area where Spaniards had coined a lot of money and left part of it sealed up in the mine with the intent to return for the rest. There's quite a bit of corroborating evidence for this quest, but it seems that Mr. Stoll and the other investors became discouraged and gave up the pursuit shortly after it began, although Joseph Smith continued working for Josiah Stoll as a farmhand. Josiah Stoll was one of the early believers in Joseph Smith's claim that he had seen a vision and that he would have a great work to do. Some of Mr. Stoll's family did not believe Joseph Smith and became adamantly opposed to him. A year later, it was Mr. Stoll's son or nephew, accounts vary, accused the youthful seer of having unlimited control over the illusions of their sire, and charged him with vagrancy, being a disorderly person, an impostor, and a seer, accounts vary. The case was brought before Justice Neely for examination. Now, examination is where a judge hears the accusations to determine if there is a case to be tried. And this is where the paper trail ends. There was no case, no crime, no punishment, and no conviction. P.S. Brandon Flowers, you were right. Richard Dawkins hadn't done his research, or he would have known that the source for his misinformation was an outdated 1994 book whose theory was debunked long ago. So this was his follow-up question that he posed to me. How can you believe on someone that claims he dug up the golden plates not far from his backyard after he was allegedly involved in a scam? How can I believe that Joseph Smith fulfilled ancient prophecy to the letter and accomplished the works given him by Christ himself, translating the gold plates by the power and gift of God, having compiled the largest book of direct revelations from Christ known to mankind? How can I believe this even though he was accused of a scam? Good question. There is no end to what Joseph Smith was accused of. That is a fact. What is not a fact is that he was a convicted con man. But Jesus was. Does that fact affect your testimony of him as the Christ? His apostles, the ones who wrote the New Testament, were convicted too, and they also received the death penalty for their high crimes. Does this destroy your confidence in the New Testament? Let's not even get into the fates of the accused prophets in the Old Testament. All of these men were accused by many, convicted by the laws of the land, and punished for their crimes. Jesus even prophesied to the apostles of their fate. They would be accused to death, just like he was. In those days, many were convinced that the character flaws of Christ, and the apostles and the prophets before them, were proof enough that all of them were con men. Would you have agreed with their accusers and participated in their persecution, prosecution, or even execution? No Latter-day Saint alive should be surprised when evil is spoken of Joseph Smith. That was one of the first prophecies that he learned would come to pass. Didn't Moroni say that in every nation and in every language both good and evil would be spoken of the prophet Joseph Smith? He couldn't have been a more insignificant boy from a more insignificant family in a more insignificant part of the world, and yet today, here we are, going on 200 years later, continuing to fulfill that prophecy to the letter as we discuss his name in every nation and language, speaking both good and evil of him, some testifying that he is Christ's prophet, and others accusing him day and night. As I've said before, my goal in all of this is to strengthen the saints, those of you who might be wondering and are affected by the never-ending hurricane of accusations, but don't know how to sort out the truth from the lie. You are alive on the cusp of a profound prophecy of John the Revelator being fulfilled. And by the way, the book of Revelation is a vision of future events that was written by a convicted criminal while he was in prison. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, "Now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death." This prophecy of John says that there will be a point in his future where it will be said, "Now is come salvation, strength, the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ." Meaning, there was a time between John and the fulfillment of his vision when salvation, strength, the kingdom of our God, and his power were not here. But when this establishment of the kingdom on earth is finalized, the accuser which accused our brethren before God day and night will be cast down and overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Joseph Smith and countless others gave their lives as well as their testimony, and the kingdom of our God is gaining in strength. The doctrines and ordinances of salvation have been reestablished, and the kingdom of God has been nothing less than miraculously established by the power of his Christ, by visions and angels, by prophecies, revelation, instructions, and warnings from the very mouth of God. You see, for me, it's like going to a movie with you and you spending the whole time looking down at the sticky spot on the floor and complaining about the scratches in the seat in front of you or the unraveling piece of carpet in the aisles. You're so distracted with such petty things, you're missing the movie. While you're distracted scrutinizing Joseph Smith or the Book of Mormon to find the slightest perceived flaw, I search to find countless prophecies being fulfilled. The Book of Mormon will focus people's attention on the doctrines of Christ. And as Joseph Smith prophesied, no unhallowed hand can stop the work from progressing. Persecutions may rage, mobs may combine, armies may assemble, calumny may defame, but the truth of God will go forth boldly, nobly, and independent, till it has penetrated every continent, visited every clime, swept every country, and sounded in every ear, till the purposes of God shall be accomplished, and the great Jehovah shall say, "The work is done." As the kingdom had just been established and the gathering had scarcely begun in Kirtland, Ohio, the whole of the priesthood membership filled a 14 by 14-foot log schoolhouse. My bedroom is larger than that. In that setting, in 1834, a meeting was held where Joseph Smith asked the brethren to bear testimony on the work of building up the kingdom that they had been commissioned to do. After everyone had spoken, Joseph Smith said, "Brethren, I have been very much edified and instructed in your testimonies here tonight. But I want to say to you before the Lord that you know no more concerning the destinies of this church and kingdom than a babe upon its mother's lap. You don't comprehend it. It's only a little handful of priesthood you see here tonight. But this church will fill North and South America. It will fill the world." Prophecies and scriptures fulfilled, fulfilled, and fulfilled. Isn't that the test of a prophet? Determining whether 10,000 accusations from 200 years ago are true or false about Joseph Smith, I'll leave that up to the historians to document. It actually bores me to death. But principles at work, prophecy, and seeing its fulfillment, that's what excites me, and Joseph Smith delivers. And exactly like the prophets and apostles of old, the same pattern of persecution follows in the wake of the truth, because the truth is always going to appear strange to the world. For those who sincerely struggle to find answers, instead of spending your time and focus down in the dung and the dirt, that nourishes the tree that is getting taller and stronger every passing decade, try looking up and follow the trunk up through the branches and leaves and examine the actual fruit of the tree, because ye shall know them by their fruits. If you are a sincere seeker of truth, look beyond the accusations and the distractions of modern Pharisees and Sadducees. You may see something they don't want you to find.